What if I had told you that the crumpled dollar bill in your pocket, is secretly screaming, "I'm melting," and that XRP might be the fire extinguisher that nobody actually sees coming? And brace yourself, because the second that you say, nah, 10 grand XRP is impossible, you might already be priced out of the future. So picture this, I'm sipping a too hot latte on 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗱 Road, minding my own business, when a tweet storm from a guy called Pumpius sucker punches my feed. Now, he's not pitching Moonboy hopium, he's just rattling off some hard-hitting macro stats about dollar devaluation, trillion-dollar debts, and a mind-boggling blueprint for tokenizing almost everything that we own. Now, my first thoughts are, either this dude is cooking up a spicy conspiracy, or he's spotted the one chess move that Wall Street's hiding behind its back. Now, you know me. I can't resist a good old rabbit hole deep dive, and so I grab the kind of metaphorical kind of spelunking helmet and just follow me down. Now, before we dive into why Pumpius thinks 4 or even 5-digit XRP is not sci-fi, let me put on the kind of the grown-up voice for one hot minute here, because it might just shock you, but I am not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. Your investments, of course, are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and today's video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. There, compliance gremlins are satisfied. Now let's get to the good stuff. Now, the juicy kind of tweet thread, it starts with a history lesson straight out of a doomsday documentary. Remember 1971? Now, I wasn't around, but my dad still kind of grumbles about how a burger cost 50 cents. Now, that summer, Uncle Sam ditched the gold standard, and ever since, the dollar purchasing power has apparently nosedived, get this, by over 96%. Fast forward to today, and the US owns more than $34 trillion and is paying interest north of $1 trillion a year. So imagine a credit card statement so huge that you need a telescope to read the balance. And that's the Fed's solution, right? I should say, what is the Fed's solution? It's to keep printing, presses kind of whirling while they're kind of, auditioning for the Fast and the Furious 12. Quantitative easing drift, if you will. Now, Pumpius's claims here that this ever-expanding debt balloon is actually good news for XRP holders. And you might be thinking, why? Well, it's because when traditional money melts faster than ice cream in the Dubai sun, markets scramble for settlement rails that don't kind of buckle under inflationary pressure. Now enter the XRP ledger, which, according to him, is the universal remote which can switch channels between any asset that you can tokenize. Tokenize everything, right? That word alone kind of makes my brain spark like an overloaded power socket. BlackRock, JP Morgan, Citi, HSBC, they're not playing Monopoly here. They're building pipelines to convert real-world assets into on-chain tokens. Now, conservative estimates put potential tokenized value at $16 to $30 trillion by 2030. That's 30 trillion. That's 10 Apple kind of inks glued together with diamond studs. And each of those tokens needs a lightning-fast, cross-border, low-fee settlement layer. Now, Pumpius argues that XRP is tailor-made. Atomic swaps, built-in decentralized exchange, 3-second finality, blah blah, tech spec heaven. So, in simple English, it's Venmo on rocket fuel, minus the weekend downtime and with global reach. So here is the skeptics in me kind of piping up. I remember the 2017 hype cycle when everyone's grandma thought RippleNet was a brand new phishing net. Today though, Ripple has more than 300 banks and institutions plugged in, and their on-demand liquidity, now rebranded Ripple Payments, like a kind of, makeover, if you will. Now, moves money across corridors that we only dreamed of back then. Plus, they've actually dropped RLUSD, a stablecoin natively living on the XRPL, purpose-built for big league liquidity, alongside newly integrated USDC. Now, that's not a white paper promise. It's live, it's humming, and it's pushing real value while we Netflix and chill. So let's sprinkle in some real life anecdotes on top then, right? Last month, a buddy of mine manages payroll for a remittance startup. Now, they switched a chunk of their Philippine corridor traffic to Ripple payments and shaved off 2 days of float plus nearly 60% in fees. Now, he told me, half laughing, we're officially allergic to Swift now. Now, it's tiny in the grand scheme of things, but multiply that by thousands of corridors and billions of dollars, and suddenly XRP is not just a speculative chip. It's the grease in the gears of global money. But wait, the critics yell from the cheap seats at the back. If XRP hits $10,000, its market cap flies into quadrillions. That's bigger than the entire world economy. Math doesn't lie, so your moonshot is toast. They have a point. It's a fair point. Except Pumpius says that market cap is the wrong yardstick, and something that I've been talking about for years. And it's for the high velocity settlement assets, right? So we got to think about market cap only being a representation of the price, right? It does not show liquidity. It doesn't show value. It doesn't show inflows. All market cap shows you is the macro level pricing, right? Liquidity has a multiplier on the market cap, but that's a video for another day. So let's think of it like measuring the value of toll booth tokens instead then by adding up every single coin that has ever passed through it. Right? Now, if a single token moves back and forth 20 times a day, then the aggregated transaction volume dwarfs the so-called cap. So it's not that the XRPL would magically mint quadrillions of new dollars, right? That's ludicrous. It's that each XRP might sprint through the system a dozen times, maybe hundreds of times daily, acting as a bridge among tokenized real estate or carbon credits or even sovereign bonds. You kind of name it. And look, right, I get it, right? $10,000, it sounds absurd. Heck, 5 digits makes kind of your left eyelid twitch. And I'm not sure if you can see this, right? Yet, if you step back and remember when Amazon shares hit $100 in 1999, and analysts kind of swore up and down it was overvalued because books can't justify that. Or maybe closer to home, Bitcoin at $1,000 in 2013. Experts, they laughed louder than a laugh track sitcom. Now today, nobody bats an eyelid at, let's say, 100 grand BTC after a weekend rally. So the context is changing, right? Narratives have evolved, and the math recalibrates when utility meets the mass adoption. Still, there is a mountain-sized challenge here, and it's called regulation, right? We've all kind of watched the courtroom kind of telenova, of Ripple versus the SEC, from Hinman emails to settlement rumors. A single unfavorable ruling could kneecap US institutions from even touching XRP with a 10-foot pole. But let's not forget Ripple's global strategy here. Asia Pacific corridors, Latin America fintechs, Middle Eastern banks. These players, they don't have to wait for Uncle Sam's blessing to route money smarter, right? If US regulators drag their feet, then other regions may just sprint ahead. And ironically, the greenback could be the one that's actually stuck on the bench. Now, let's kind of tackle Pumpius' monetary velocity model then, because the beating heart of his $10,000 thesis is that. Are you ready to kind of nerd out with me? Let's get into nerd mode. I feel that should be like a heading somewhere, but I don't do editing. So anyway, let's say the XRP kind of soaks up 10% of the kind of $7.5 trillion daily FX market. that would be $750 billion zipping through. Then we can add 10% of all tokenized RWAs. Let's call that $3 trillion in 2030. So it's pretty decent, right? And maybe even 5% of the debt settlements, another kind of tidy trillion. Ballpark daily flows north of $4 trillion. Slice that by the circulating XRP supply, under kind of 55 billion coins, after escrow kind of runs their course, of course, and layer in a velocity factor, meaning how many times each coin moves per day. Even a modest 20 turns kind of pushes the implied price into a 4 digits level, right? Crank the velocity to 50 and voila, 5-digit peak through the curtain. And I know, I get it. Your brain might be begging for ice cream right now, but let's kind of pan back, right? The equation, it isn't predicting a sudden one-day spike. It's a function of compounding adoption plus a dash of supply squeeze, right? Remember, right, Ripple burns a tiny amount of XRP as transaction fees. And big institutions, they hoard strategic reserves, right? Every micro burn, every kind of lockup institution's stash, is kind of like trimming the kind of branches off a tree. The fruit left behind, it kind of gets juicier. Yet none of this, of course, matters if retail investors can't swim these turbulent waters without a life jacket. And that is why a chunk of my research time is in our free educational Discord server. The link for that is in the description. Now, we nerd out over tokenized pilots, cross-border regulations, and meme-worthy charts, all in a kind of drama-free zone. Whether you're a new fish or a saltwater whale, right? Come hang out, just promise not to buy kind of based solely on random YouTubers yelling kind of Lambo and, yachts. And speaking of which, of course, if you decide to level up your actual trading game, I use the Blofin crypto exchange. Now, for full transparency here, the Blofin link down below is an affiliate link. And if you end up opening an account and trading there, a tiny slice of the trading fee helps actually keep this channel caffeine fueled and ad free. So there's no extra cost to you for this. It's just honestly between us friends. And hey, Blofin has some pretty killer liquidity pairs for XRP. So if you want to kind of test the waters, check it out using the link down below. All right, let's kind of thread together Pumpius's giant jigsaw puzzle then, right? The very first piece is the dollar devaluation and the debt spiral. That's the ticking clock in our thriller here. The second piece is the real-world asset tokenizations worth tens of $1 trillion needing lightning settlement. The third thing is in Ripple's institutional footprint, already kind of handling live corridors. Now, those three alone actually form a potential cocktail. If you add in a kind of garnish of monetary velocity model and XRP's capped supply, and suddenly the $10,000, target, it looks less like magic internet money, dreams, and more like a logical byproduct of a global liquidity reset. But every cocktail has a hangover risk. Black swans lurk in the shadows, government bans, catastrophic hacks, a new ledger stealing XRP's funder, or even something as benign like a quantum-proof cryptography upgrade, leaving legacy chains all in the dust. So you've got to stay nimble here. You've got to question everything, and you've got to respect the risk. Remember, the dot-com bubble, many crashed, some adapted, and a handful became trillion-dollar titans. Will crypto echo that saga? Let me kind of share a quick personal curveball here, because 2 years ago, I nearly kind of rage quit on XRP when it kind of laugishly kind of under $1 while meme coins kind of minted overnight billionaires or millionaires. And my buddy Dave dumped his bag and bought a fancy jet ski. I kind of stuck around partly because I'm stubborn and partly because I saw Ripple rolling out these ODL corridors quietly like ninja accountants. So sure enough, when Southeast Asia banks started settling remittances in seconds, I kind of felt like the kid who had held onto his kind of vintage Pokemon cards while everyone else kind of traded for fidget spinners. The moral of the story, of course, is that real utility ages like fine wine. It's slow to start, but suddenly it does taste good in the long run. So where does all of this leave us then? Well, if Pumpius is right, we're on the brink of a financial plot twist where settlement speed and interoperability become the table stakes, right? So let's think think of XRP as the lubricant inside the engine of tokenized everything. And if it's wrong, XRP still might nab kind of a modest share of RWA flows and land 3-digit territory someday. It's hardly chump change. Now, either way, of course, either scenario kind of underscores some of the very same takeaways. You got to focus solely on past price action. I guess it's actually like judging a movie just by its trailer. The real plot unfolds when institutions actually hit the play button. Okay, so we're hitting the home stretch here. So let's kind of distill the big nuggets then, right? The dollar's punching power or purchasing power is on a roller coaster with broken brakes, right? The sovereign debt is the screaming passenger. Like tokenized real estate, equities, carbon credits, you name it, could be up to $30 trillion by the decade's end. Now, Ripple already kind of lassoed 300 plus banks and rolled out RLUSD to grease the wheels. Market cap math doesn't capture high velocity utility tokens. It's just a kind of throughput, not a scoreboard snapshot, and only shows you what the macro level pricing is. It doesn't show liquidity, doesn't show inflows, doesn't show value. It is hypothetical valuation. And $10,000 XRP, of course, is not guaranteed. But dismissing it outright might be the kind of costliest kind of blind spot in your investing journey. So let's keep our eyes open, our minds curious, and our risk management tight. Dive deeper with us in Discord, do your own homework, and treat bold predictions as starting points, not as finished lines. Whether XRP peaks at $10, $100, or even $10,000, the larger narrative is irrefutable. Money is evolving, and those who adapt early write tomorrow's playbooks.